Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Omnia Performance Podcast with myself, Fergus Crawley, and with Dr. Phil's self, Dr. Phil. Say hello.
Self. I like that. It's even better.
It works, doesn't
The
it?
self.
Anyway, we are about to lose the plot as we have an open discussion that is unprepped for and quite loose. So, drumroll, please, because this is going to be a roller coaster. But before we buckle you in and send you into the stratosphere, I think it's only fair that we ask you to rate and/or review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. Share this episode or an episode previously with a friend. And please do make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button. Thank you very much. So today we're going to discuss what we think the best all-round test of overall fitness across all disciplines could possibly be. And I'll go in hard from the off and say it isn't CrossFit. The end.
The end?
No, I'll elaborate on that. So I think CrossFit is a fantastic test across the board, but it really does miss out the demands of the energy system that is aerobic, ultra endurance, well executed demand. I think it's missing the resilience, it's missing the repetitive aerobic execution, it's missing the nutrition strategy, it's missing the things that go on with marathon training, with Ironman training, with ultra marathons that are a huge part of this industry, and instead focuses much more on a top end strength with gymnastic and anaerobic execution focus points. And whilst it is randomized, and yes, there is an aerobic capacity that underpins it all, that aerobic endurance is very rarely tested because I've seen WODs and events in CrossFit called endurance events that are 20 minutes long, which just hurts my soul. And I should preface this, I am being flippant and tongue-in-cheek here, and if you would like a more nuanced and less spray from the hip take on our opinions on CrossFit versus hybrid training, then please do listen to the podcast that we recorded on that a while ago, because we really do dive into the nuance, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm in any way bashing CrossFit. That's not what I'm doing. But I do think it would be fascinating to see how a lot of top-end CrossFit athletes could adapt to if you said, right, go out and run a 50K best effort, go. Not in a weighted vest, not with 100 burpees every kilometer, not with swimming reps and muscle-ups breaking it up. What can you do? Go. And it obviously wouldn't be Kipchoge level times, as runners would like to say, oh, well, look, they're not even good at running. But would it be under 5 hours? Would it be under 4 hours for some of them? Would they bonk at 28, 30K? What would happen? How could they train for it? How would that training influence their training for what they're currently good at? I think the balance of disciplines across the board would make the approach to programming even more demanding, and therefore it would open up a whole new side of adaptation from an individual point of view that'd be fascinating from a scientific point of view. So I'm not going to make any suggestions yet on what I think the components of a critical test are. If we were to create the perfect athlete, how would we test them? But instead I'm going to pass over to Phil to cool down my hot potato, as it were. Thoughts?
Thoughts? I love CrossFit. I think it's a great sport, but you're certainly right in terms of...
I just want to be clear. I agree on everything you've just said up until but you're certainly right on part. Just to be clear, I love CrossFit and think it's a fantastic sport as well. But I do think when it comes to testing, it does lack that sort of actual aerobic execution demand, which would be exciting to see happen in such a great sport with such fantastic coverage and fantastic people within it. Okay, yeah. Hopefully I've cleared that up and don't seem like a contrarian dickhead now.
They found their complete niche, haven't they? You know, those short, powerful events plus with those 10, 20-minute events, you know, they really find that blend of strength and some form of endurance, but it's not the endurance that we kind of discuss, especially on the Omnia Performance podcast, in terms of, you know, being able to run, I don't know, a 50K ultra, exactly like I said. I think the qualities are completely different. And
to caveat that a bit more, that's not, if you took anybody out with the world of CrossFit, their definition of endurance would be very different to CrossFit's definition of endurance. I think that is the crux of it for me, because I think when we're looking at the average population, let's try and understand what, if you spoke to Steve on the street, who's just stumbled out of the pub 3 pints deep, and asked him, what do you think the fittest man in the world would do? And said, he's done this, he's done this, he's done this, he's done this. what would make them go, oh yeah, bloody hell, that ticks all the boxes that I understand? Because people understand fitness in very binary ways, whereas CrossFit removes the binary element in the same way hybrid training does, which is why when you've got runners saying, oh, CrossFitters are slow and don't even run fast, well, they're 40 kilos heavier than you. They can also put you over their head for reps and can walk on their hands for distance and can actually do a pistol squat, whereas you'd crumble, Mr. Runner on the internet.
That should be an event.
Yeah, I
like
think it should,
find a load of 50 kg runners that whine and then put them there
and
as barbells.
Watch them try and do a bodyweight squat and fold.
So they can be the equipment and just let the guys overhead squat multiple times. 21, 15, 9.
Just people with black box tattoos on them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, they are completely different sports, really. I mean, CrossFit had a lot of criticism at the beginning. People say it's not a sport; it's just exercising. And it's like, no, they've created a sport, and it's a very exciting one. But clearly, they lean into that excitement. So you then structure WODs to lean into the excitement. Like, they're shorter, they're more explosive, they try and do it so that the athletes are kind of alongside each other. Because if it was doing a half iron, they're going to be at completely different stages. And I think the CrossFit Games broadens that idea of fitness, but I think it's because they've got time, because it's over like 5 days, maybe more catching up with those individual sanction events.
There's a commercial element to consider as well, isn't there? Because you need bums on seats to sell tickets, and if those tickets are spread over 50 miles, then it's going to be harder to sell tickets.
Exactly.
So, yeah, very, very, very important considerations to have. Because, as you've said, fantastic job of bringing it to life, making it exciting, and putting X person next to Y person. And I know the ranch during, was it 2021, 2020, whenever the games were sort of behind closed doors-ish, there were some trail runs and things worked in there, which were filmed really well, but that was because you didn't have the commercial footfall to consider as well. And it is a business, and let's not be naive. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I wish they just did things like this, because that's ultimately why Ironman is falling apart. So it's a case of you need to look at the sport only exists because of the business behind it, and that will only continue to exist if they continue to get bums on seats and get people engaged with it. So if you sent them out for a marathon, would it be engaging? Would it be exciting? Probably not as much as getting them to do a 20-minute Metcon in one lane with a swimming pool in the middle of it and some rings at the other end. And I'll hold my hands up and fully concede that. But this is not a discussion on which sport out there is the best way to test an athlete. This is which test of an athlete would be the most comprehensive testing of said athlete that we can muster. I think CrossFit probably comes closest, but I'm going to be biased and say that I feel I've done a few things that put the energy system demand in a similar space, but everything I've done has been significantly less skill dominant, which means that I've almost been testing brute execution rather than the elements of skill and repetition and composure that CrossFit brings to the table. So I think there's definitely a middle ground between these two worlds where we can find a really nice group of things, and I'm going to start making some suggestions. I think
before we start, can we call this the Omnia Games?
Yeah, okay. We're
and we've got a weekend.
I haven't had the trademark submission back yet. So, Jesus, the hybrid games, the Omnia games, something. Yeah, we'll either get sued, somebody will steal our idea, or we'll create something very cool in 2023. One of those three options will happen. But I just want to make clear that we are somewhat being flippant for the sake of trying to come to conclusions on a non-prepared for podcast. But I am going to throw suggestion number one out there, which is a super total. I think would be the best. A super total in one day. So day one, super total, I think would be a great test of adequate skill in terms of applied strength and mobility through a sort of complex range of motion. So it means that somebody would have to be hyper mobile and hyper strong in different positions, but could then also manipulate the leverage advantages of a sumo deadlift or a low bar squat, for example, which is where you're blending the sporting competitive element of the tactical decision making around how you train and things, which is where I think things could be interesting. What I don't want to get into is any of this, oh, but he did it without chalk, which makes him stronger and cooler. Oh, his was mixed grip. That's not real grip. I don't want any of this shit. That's just internet bullshit. We want what is the best way to test a person's strength within the parameters of what strength is measured as. And I think a super total will be a great way to do that. Is there anything that you'd add as a raw strength component?
So with super total, you want deadlift, which you can do either stance.
Yes.
Right? And then a squat, high bar, low bar, whatever you choose to do.
Yeah. Squat the bar on your back, depth up.
Yeah. And then bench with a pause.
Yep.
Under those rules.
Yep.
Would you throw in weightlifting in there?
Yep. Yeah. So clean and jerk and snatch. Yeah, super total.
Snatch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously to standard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to lean into the weightlifting side of things in particular because I feel that being able to generate force incredibly quickly and very high force very quickly really is one of those physiological skills which is right there on the outskirts. That's really hard to develop to a very high level, especially when you are doing all the other training for the other events, because of those are utilizing specific muscle fibers which get easily fatigued. So because of that, you've got a limited use with them. So if you can structure your training so effectively that you take full advantage of them and become incredibly, really develop the explosive strength, I think that's really key. And then that's me talking about it without the skill element or anything like that. So I would definitely want like a, clean and jerk and a snatch 1RM total in there. And if it's with, the more absolute strengths when it comes to the squat, bench and deadlift, like I'm all happy with that. Certainly, like if we're surfing some kind of curve where we're hitting all the strength sides of that thing. You could be really nerdy and just like, oh, I want you to do some kind of isometric mid-thigh pull to just really see how much you can like push into the ground.
Like we can't market that, Phil.
But no, it's boring.
That's the scientist in you. I prefer the salesman from the previous podcast.
Yeah, okay. I ignore my boring ones.
Okay, event 2. Let's go 5 events. So let's follow the pattern of the CrossFit Games. If the CrossFit Games markets itself as creating the fittest athletes in the world, I would contest that because of the claims that I've made. I don't want it in any way be misconstrued as demonizing or trying to demean this in any way. It's just a case of, I do think from an absolute top end demand point of view, there is a component missing. And I know that isn't a part of the sport, but I think if we're looking at the absolute range of this ideal Captain America style athlete, then I think the CrossFit Games and CrossFit in general terms is missing this component. Hence why we are rewriting the wheel within the 5-day window. No, we're going to go 5 events, not 5 days. Because we could say that we do it over 5 weekends, Phil. We don't really know. We're making this up as we go along. It could be 5 weeks, it could be 5 days. But day 2, what do you think? Event 2, what do you think?
With event 2, because it's the next day, would you go completely to the other side? As in, we've just had strength. Now we're going full endurance.
Discussion.
Right. Okay. 20K.
I'm leaning towards in my head, basically following the pattern of the way that we put a training week together, where it's most intense to least intense, and then actually maybe spread it over 5 weeks, to essentially, because you're then allowing the athlete to actually recover adequately to execute what they've built tolerance for, and then their challenge is to essentially stay somewhat peaked, or account for the fact that they might not be peaked. So therefore, how do they perform when under fatigue? But I think if you put 5 big events back to back, then there's no way that sort of unenhanced athletes would be able to do that without them all breaking. And that's not a very good marketing strategy, is it?
No, not at all. So if we're following that, I know what my number 5 would be.
Okay.
A 20K long distance ski.
Interesting. That's number 5.
Yeah, possibly a biathlon.
Okay.
When it comes to sort of VO2 max values, they found that in general, and I'm saying this in general, that the highest values of VO2 max have been found in cross-country skiers.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, I want to see, if you're utilizing, the
So are you suggesting people get out on skis and do this? Or are you suggesting a ski erg?
no, I'm suggesting get out on skis.
Brilliant. Okay,
Because
like it, like
it's
it. Yeah.
like if I'm coming at it as a fan. Yeah, I'm probably interested in their VO2 max, but now I want them to to cross country ski with a gun on their back, biathlon, make them look like James Bond. Every single competitor,
And
and
the gun's just for marketing, is it?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. Sold.
Exactly.
Sold.
And I
Sold.
want them, not looking like the normal guns they use in the biathlon. I want them looking like Walther PPK, like on GoldenEye N64.
I like this. I like this a lot. How
So yeah,
long?
I think it really
What's
pushes them aerobically.
what sort of pace is cross country skiing roughly? How long would a
Pace.
20K take? Do you know?
I am not too sure. My knowledge of the sport is not great, but I know the highest VO2 max ever recorded was 96.
Wow.
And good is like
That's
50,
so high.
and it was a cross country skier. So and when I first started my sports science degree as well, there was a figure in a textbook which had like a list of all of the most aerobically demanding sports in like some kind of rough order, and cross country skiing was at the top, followed by rowing. So let's get them cross country skiing.
Okay, so we've got number 1 and we've got number 5. I like it. I like the fact that for most people, they'd have to learn a skill that they are not already competent in as well, which is bringing in elements of what CrossFit does really well, which is the randomized, you need to retain skill in these things all year round. So I want a strongman medley of sorts in there, but I want it to be a part A and part B day, where part A is a strength dominant strongman medley with a half-hour break into part B, which is a very traditional, almost 45-minute to an hour long, real brutal chipper, get the reps down sort of CrossFit workout across full body metrics. So the strongman medley, I think, would be a combination of, I'd want to avoid things like car deadlifts. I think it'd be Atlas stones, it'd be Viking press, it'd be holds, it would be truck pulls, car pulls, something that's not as eccentrically demanding because we want something left in the tank for part B. But I don't know, keg toss, essentially a lot of the components of most components of a strongman medley, but without the real top end stuff. And I think we'd probably be working a slightly lighter weight for a higher rep scheme than, for example, working up to an absolute max effort Atlas stone. I think it'd be a case of an ascending Atlas stone pyramid into X into Y, or singular events within a couple of hours that you're graded on, and then you get a break, and then you go into part B, which is a sort of big old chipper style workout. I think that would be a really good way of testing applied strength endurance from a strength bias and then a strength endurance bias, and see how they compare. Thoughts?
No, the first thing that came to my head was Brian Shaw on cross country skis as soon as you said strongman.
Oh god!
So
I wonder what size his feet are. I wonder what size his feet are.
Boats, I think those
Boats,
shoes,
yeah.
boats.
Cross country boating. It's just a boat on each foot.
No, I think that's a great idea. Strongman is a nice transition from real absolute strength into ones with slightly more skill, because that's slightly unpredictable because of the type of event it is. And you'll be able to hit that strength from different angles, like you said, the holes, stuff like that. So I think that's a great idea, especially if you can get like the truck pull in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That would be
what do you think the best sort of CrossFit Metcon chipper sort of focus would be? Is there something you've seen at the games that springs to mind? I'm struggling to think of anything that I think could really tick the box for me, because obviously we don't need to work in build up to a 3RM snatch, 3RM this or anything like that. We don't need a sort of medley. But there's, I mean, the games this year, they had the sandbag pyramid, which was essentially strongman in many ways, and that was very entertaining. So I think I'm trying to think of previous games events that have sort of ticked the box.
I might even lean more into the like traditional strongman for that day, and then lean more into the CrossFit for the middle day.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So almost, if I, yeah, I can see where you're going with this. So essentially, event 1, top end strength. Event 2, applied strongman skill dominant strength. Event 3, missing. Event 4, big old sort of chipper strength endurance dominant rowing machine skill. You know what? You know what? Maybe not. Maybe
I'd
it's a
have a
bit. Maybe it's
5K
a bit more.
run.
Maybe it's a bit more hierarchy. Day 4.
Or just see, you know, if we're going real aerobic on the last day, we want something that, you know, pushes you above working beyond your VO2 max, I'd say. So you'll come maybe, or just under. Normally you're working at your VO2 max at your 3K pace. So maybe go like a 5K. And it's like the coveted 5K, everyone wants to get under 20 minutes. If you're like an average runner, people can see that and have a rough idea of where they fit in relation to what they're seeing on screen, because it's so well known, the 5K.
I'm going to throw a curveball in.
It's a bit boring, but maybe
I'm going to throw a
boring,
curveball in and suggest that rather than a 5K, it's a lactate heart rate threshold test, because then not only can you compare times and distance covered, but you can compare the efficiency of the athlete in terms of their execution through their lactate readings. And you could actually employ sort of ear pricks and things in there to get accurate reading. So it wouldn't be for grading purposes, but it would be interesting to determine what is X person at X body weight that performed this way and that event performing when it comes to their lactate heart rate threshold. And I think 10 minutes more, I mean, on average, I'd say a lot of recreational CrossFit athletes probably would do a 5K off the cuff in 24 to 26 minutes, give or take. So adding 4 minutes on at a slightly higher effort is reasonable, I think, if we're coming from the CrossFit angle. If you're obviously coming from those that are a bit more strength biased, then they'll be competent in getting through 30 minutes of straight running. It might kill them a lot more than the other stuff might, but that's ultimately the whole point of this, isn't it? So have we done it? I think day 1 super total. Day 2
we're missing day 3
strongman day. Day 3 is lactate heart rate threshold.
Oh, okay.
Day 4 like 160 beats per minute, 30-45 minutes CrossFit sort of, or maybe it's just a CrossFit event day where you've got elements of skill that are essentially the test on day 4 is your ability to maintain the execution of the skill under fatigue, which is bread and butter CrossFit when it comes to top end, really. And then day 5 is 20K cross country skiing.
I mean, we've definitely gone from like a fan perspective there. Like if we went from like a science perspective,
we're balanced.
We're balanced. Because you could always get absolute strength, vertical jump, VO2 max test, sprint test, you know, almost like your own little combine.
Yeah.
But ours has expanded on that and tried to hit kind of those areas, but from like more of a exciting event style. I mean, I'd definitely watch it.
Yeah, but it's a balance, isn't it? You need to, because this is the problem is that there isn't a sport or a collection of sports that can justifiably claim to do this, and that's because you need to balance the marketability and the commerciality of it. Yes, if you took everybody in the world and put them in a lab for a week and put them through every single bit of testing, you'd have on data who is the most well-rounded athlete on the planet. But then you'd have the camp of people saying, well, that's irrelevant because Kipchoge runs faster than they do. Well, that's irrelevant because Dan Griggs deadlifts 480 and this guy doesn't. So they're not actually that good at this. And you're like, well, okay. Cheers, Reddit. Thank you. But nonetheless, it's a case of, I think scientifically looking at it isn't fun, because then that misses the element of the person performing on the day, their psychological preparation, their programming, everything that goes into preparing for these events. And I think it's good to know that they're not randomized as well, because it means that the programming, the process of training for them would be a real good experiment in, holy shit, how can somebody develop their top end strength as well as becoming competent at medleys, as well as maintaining their Metcon threshold ability, as well as improving their running in that sort of range, whilst also having enough of aerobic base and the skill acquisition to be able to cross country ski for 20 kilometers in a competitive environment, whilst maintaining a gun on their shoulder. That all sounds very exciting to me. And I think in the right setting, that would be a very cool thing to do. So the question is it 5 days or is it 5 weeks?
I'm not sure. I think we need to get some kind of 100-meter sprint in there.
Oh, shit. Yeah, you're right.
Because
do we do that
always like
the
golden event from the Olympics,
Yeah.
That's a great spectacle. And, we talked about strength and endurance, but we're missing that sort of like speed.
Yeah. Bloody hell, there's too many components to fitness, aren't there? And then there'll be somebody somewhere being like, well, they should have done some sort of kicking at goalposts to see what their applied skill was like. You're like, well, yeah,
Darts.
darts, yeah, pints. Um, so 100-meter sprint, logic would say to me, put that on the same day as the super total. And then there's a part of me that wants to do a mile as well because people know what a good mile time is. Because if we're going more on the marketability side of things, but then again,
I
super
don't know.
total cross mile.
I'm leaning into having that on day 3. So you went vertical jump, 100-meter sprint, mile sprint, and then maybe day 4 you'd have the more, like you said, the lactate threshold test, or some kind of 5K. You are in that middle distance, short to middle distance range, and then the next day you're in the long distance range. So we're kind of like strength into speed into anaerobic into aerobic, maybe.
Oh, this sounds terrible. I am trying to think if there's nothing we've missed. You're definitely right to flag the 100 meters. But this is the problem. We've come to a point where there is no real obvious solution. I think that's the beauty of this. It means that I just love people that train hard and work towards things. I think that's the summary here. Is I don't really care what the answer to this question is. And whilst I started potentially, if anyone's feeling irate, it could have been misconstrued as me bashing CrossFit. That's very much not the case. It's a case of understanding that I would love, just from a purely fascination point of view, to see what the melting pot of athletes we have access to worldwide in a competitive setting, what would happen when you sort of take a little bit of all of them and see who comes out on top. Because then there's elements of execution, there's elements of fatigue, there's elements of recovery, there's elements of who's sleeping the best. There's all these things going on that would make it really interesting. I think we've got the bare bones of something very exciting there, which, to summarize, day 1, super total. Day 2, series of strongman events. Day 3, vertical 100 meters mile. Day 4, lactate heart rate threshold test, morning. Afternoon, continuous 30 minute-ish chipper CrossFit conventional style workout, or a series of shorter ones like you'd find at Wadapalooza or something like that. Day 5, 20-kilometer ski. It can't be in days. It's got to be weeks, I think. So it's a league. It's not a league.
You'd have better performances if it was in weeks.
Yeah. But then it's difficult to do it in a location setting from a marketability point of view, because then people would have to come back and back. So maybe it could be set up remotely. Maybe round 1 could be remote.
We need to find a location that has, beautiful sun, but 20 minutes down the road, you're in mountains, you've got snow.
Denver High School. That's my guess.
Okay.
That's my guess. Anyone willing to contest on that one? That's yeah. Salt Lake City University. Oh, that's basically a Mormon college, though, isn't it? Really? So.
Is that Utah?
Yeah, it's Utah. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure Salt Lake City is cold and crisp, but also quite sunny. But then you go up a bit higher at certain points of the year, and you've got snow guaranteed. But then again, altitude might come into play there. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Even more fun.
Even more impressive on the day 5.
So, from a scientific point of view, you looking at that, would you think, yeah, we've really tested this athlete here? I am happy that, from my understanding as a senior lecturer in biomechanics and strength conditioning, this has ticked all the boxes for me to feel like we've really tested the range of these athletes, and there's nothing else that I'd like to add in there that wouldn't just purely be for overkill.
Where my interests are, because we're following that sort of like strength into speed, into anaerobic, into aerobic. It's clearly missing out quite a lot of skill stuff.
Yeah.
If you really want to push for like a well-rounded athlete.
That's where maybe day 4 it could be skill dominant CrossFit focus.
But if we're looking at the fittest, we're not looking for the skillist. Yeah, that's not even a word, but
most skillful.
So maybe it does. And then in terms of skill, aesthetic stuff, like all the things that we've added in require a lot of practice on. So they're clearly important skills. With the strongman, running is going to be different to cross-country skiing. So, you need a wide skill set. It's just not utilizing skills which have traditionally been in sports which are very aesthetic, like gymnastics. It depends if that's in your definition of fittest, where to me, it's not. Even in CrossFit, they're testing those skills in a physiological capacity rather than the skill capacity. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, we have just sat and chatted shite for about half an hour, and I think we've come to some reasonable conclusions, but are very, very open to discussion on this. So please do reach out to us with any thoughts or feelings you have. And I sound like a broken record, but I just want to be crystal clear that I have the utmost respect for all sports, and I am only ever flippant when it's for the sake of hilarity. But I am also against those that shout from their box that somebody else isn't doing something as well as they are because they focus on other things, etc., etc. We should celebrate everybody's achievements and everybody's athletic endeavors. And it would be fascinating to test this in this setting because it applies a competitive arena to the entire spectrum of fitness. CrossFit's definitely closest at a commercial scale, which is fantastic. But as I said at the start, I do think it lacks that real endure ability, aerobic capacity that underpins a lot of these things. And I would love to see it almost take off some of the smoke and mirrors at points, i.e. running without a weight vest on, so that the average person can understand what sort of pace these CrossFitters are moving at when it comes to running, which is something people can eventually understand. And I think your suggestion, Phil, of chucking in something obscure like cross-country skiing would test an individual's ability to adapt to a new skill, as well as how to translate their existing fitness into a new demand. So five weekends of events. We've got a lock in is what we've got, ladies and gentlemen. We've got something fun on the horizon potentially in the future. And yeah, I think we've probably
just need a location.
We've created a monster. We need Batman.
See how this develops.
Batman and Captain America to sign up and see how they get on. So if Chris Evans or Christian Bale are available, then it would be great. And if you're listening, just drop us a line, guys. We'd be more than happy to discuss things. But I hope that's the last non-prepared podcast we do for a while, because that felt pretty garrulous and unhinged. But I hope you've enjoyed it, as I actually very much did. I think Johnny's input would have been fascinating, but he's unfortunately not here. So just our input today, ladies and gentlemen. Just a quick reminder to do all of the podcasty stuff. Follow, subscribe, share with a friend, and please do rate and review. It really does mean a lot and makes us very, very happy. And we very much look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.